Good evening and welcome to our May Wild Ones chapter meeting. The title of our program tonight is called Cultivating Our Schoolyards as Habitats to Grow Scholars Who Will Become Stewards. And this will be presented by Sally Triant. And I know you're going to love this presentation tonight. My name is Marty MacArthur, and I am the president of Wild Ones River City here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I like to begin our monthly chapter meetings with our Wild Ones mission statement, which is shared by all Wild Ones chapters. Our mission statement is to promote environmentally sound landscaping practices, to preserve biodiversity through the preservation, restoration, and the establishment of native plant communities. Our motto, healing the earth 1 yard at a time. I have a few chapter business items that I want to tell you about before the presentation begins. Our June meeting coming up next month is titled Go Beyond Beauty for Wildlife, Clean Waters, and Beautiful Gardens, with Shelley Stusik from the Northwest Michigan Invasive Species Network, Grand Traverse Conservation District. This will be a virtual meeting on a very important topic. I'm really looking forward to it. All right, so what I would like to talk about in a little more depth tonight is I'm calling it Calling All Volunteers. Coming up in June, the first 2 Fridays in June, June 4th and Friday, June 11th, we are partnering with different members of the Native Plant Guild who will be selling native plants to people at the Fulton Street Farmers Market. We will be there to share information and help answer questions that people might have about native plants and their importance in the landscape. The Native Plant Guild members on June 4th will be Tammy Lundeen of She's Growing Wild. And on June 11th, it will be Deb Montgomery of Go Grow Plant Natives. This is a new endeavor for both the Native Plant Guild and for Wild Ones River City. Our thought is that if it is easier to buy native plants, more people will buy them and plant them in their yards, and our quest to increase biodiversity in the communities in which we live will happen. We hope to see you there. The market is open from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. If you know of some friends who have wanted to add some native plants to their landscape, be sure to tell them about the opportunity on June 4th and June 11th at the Fulton Street Farmers Market. But there's one catch. We need some volunteers to help staff this booth. We do not need plant experts, just people who want to share the excitement and pleasure of planting natives in their landscapes. The grower will be able to answer any questions about the specific plant, and we will have some good general information that we can also share. When you see an email or a link in the e-news to sign up to volunteer, please join us and sign up for a shift. If you can't do it in the month of June, no worries. We will be doing this again in September, and it will be so great to see you again. Now, mark your calendars for Wednesday, July 21st. Our annual fundraiser for Wild Ones River City will be on that evening. Online orders will be able to be picked up between 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. that evening. There will also be an opportunity to browse and buy. We changed the location for this event this year from the former ICCF building at 920 Cherry to the Fulton Street Farmers Market at 1145 Fulton Street East, Grand Rapids, because the ICCF building was being sold and we were unsure as to whether or not we would be able to have our event with new owners of the building. Good news is that the new owner, Monarch Realty, has welcomed us to continue with our native plant educational gardens, and we look forward to being able to not only maintain our lovely urban garden in that space, but also to be able to hold events there in the future. For this year, the annual native plant sale will be at the Fulton Street Market. Now that restrictions are lifting and we are all carefully returning to doing the things that we enjoy, we will be looking for volunteers to help with the activities of Wild Ones River City annual fundraising event. Keisha Palmer, our co-secretary on the board, will be organizing a volunteer schedule for the July fundraising plant sale. She will also be posting information in the e-news so that if you can help with this event and enjoy being a member of Wild Ones. We will also need some volunteers to help in caring for the native plant educational garden throughout the next few months. We want the garden to look loved now that we are able to gather and share in the maintenance of the garden. Please volunteer to help when Amy posts the dates for the garden work bees. If you haven't had a chance to check out if you haven't had a chance to check out our YouTube presentations, please do that. If we can get to 100 people to subscribe to our YouTube site, we will get our own URL address, which will make it even easier for people to enjoy and take advantage of the great chapter meeting presentations that we have on YouTube. Now that we are all seeing the rates of vaccinations going up, we are all freer to move around and be with one another again. We will soon be asking for interested people to become part of the board. I would like to ask you to consider getting involved in Wild Ones River City by considering joining the board as a member at large. We are all volunteers with different levels of knowledge, skills, and talents, and we would welcome hearing from you if you have any interest in joining those of us who are on the board. Think about it. There is an opportunity for you to help make a difference and help make the world a better place, or at least our little place on the earth, just by being a member on the board. Don't hesitate to say yes to this opportunity. So now, Rebecca Marquardt will introduce our speaker, Sally Triant. Thank you so much.
Hi there. Thank you for being with us this evening. We are very thrilled to have Sally with us. She's a good friend of mine and a colleague of mine. As you may know by this time, as standard protocol, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A that you see on the bottom of your screen, and feel free to make comments in the chat. In the chat is also where you will see some links that I will be sharing based on what Sally talks about. And she has this fantastic document I'll be putting in there as well. Sally Triant, environmental education consultant, founded GrowWise Learning in 2014 to develop a seasonal curriculum for all ages and to serve as a resource within the community. Her education and experience span the fine arts and the sciences bound by the common thread of teaching. With a certification in K-8 education with an emphasis on the sciences and a master's degree in curriculum and instruction, her passion to teach about the outdoors led her to place-based education. Her goal is to help individuals, educators, children, and especially families find their way back to the natural world, while in turn discovering more about themselves and their local environment by developing a keen seasonal awareness. She has learned that from the cultivated field to the urban watershed to the wilds of the forest and everywhere in between, there is wonder, inspiration, fellowship, and especially wisdom to be found in the natural world. Please welcome Sally Triant.
Hi there. Thank you. Thank you for having me tonight. Sorry. I just want to start by saying I love being a wild one, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to share my passion for connecting students of all ages to the natural world with you today. So thank you. I love all of the education opportunities that our Wild Ones chapter presents to us, and I was absolutely honored to be invited to share today. So thank you for having me. I want to start by just saying that children need nature. We know this. Really, we all do. And chances are, since you are gathering here together at a Wild Ones meeting, you know this is true too. Yet we also know that children today are spending less time in nature than ever before. According to the Children in Nature Network, on average, today's kids spend up to 44 hours a week in front of a screen, and sometimes less than 10 minutes a day playing outdoors. And for too many kids, access to nature is determined by race, income, and zip code. Children are, in fact, becoming at risk of losing opportunities for unstructured, exploratory play in nature. And what I mean by that is that time that is spent undirected, letting their own curiosity guide their adventures outdoors. And this is not a new problem. In his 2005 book, Last Child in the Woods, Richard Louv explained that a kid today can tell you about the Amazon rainforest, but not about the last time he or she explored the woods in solitude or lay in a field, listening to the wind and watching clouds move. This book actually became an anthem for a movement to connect or perhaps reconnect children to the natural world. In the book, he describes a British study that concluded that the average 8-year-old was better able to identify characters from the Japanese trading card game called Pokemon than the native species of the communities where they live. In fact, the new revisions to the Oxford Junior Dictionary took out everyday nature words like acorn, bluebell, and bramble, deeming them unnecessary, because they were no longer used enough by children to merit inclusion. In came words like broadband and voicemail and attachment to reflect today's tech-savvy kid who is more at home on the internet than they are in the woods. But people have noticed, and they've recognized that children need nature just as much now, if not more than ever. And in 2017, this beautiful book called The Lost Words was published. The introduction reads, "Once upon a time, words began to vanish from the language of children. They disappeared so quietly that at first almost no one noticed. They were fading away like water on a stone. The words were those that children used to name the natural world around them. Fern, heather, kingfisher, otter, raven, willow, wren, all of them gone. The words were becoming lost, no longer vivid in children's voices, no longer alive in their stories." It goes on to tell readers that what they hold in their hands is a spell book for conjuring back the lost words. Today, I'm going to share with you more ways that we can connect and perhaps reconnect children to that natural world through their schoolyards. This is important because while at the same time our children today are spending less time outdoors, our diminishing wild spaces are calling to be protected and preserved. How can our young citizens be inspired to care for something they do not have a relationship with? As Richard Louv explains, we cannot protect something we do not love. We cannot love what we do not know, and we cannot know what we do not see or hear or sense. So I believe the solution to creating the next generation of stewardship may be hidden in plain sight in every schoolyard in our community. By developing schoolyard habitats and inviting them into the curriculum, educators can reconnect their classrooms to the natural world, while at the same time allowing the local environment to serve as the foundation for meaningful learning. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, about 56.4 million students were projected to attend elementary, middle, and high schools across the United States in 2020. And although there are many different ways for a child to experience an education, for the majority, this will take place in a public school setting. I believe these school grounds can in fact offer hope and become the places where we can cultivate the next generation of stewards. In the childcare centers, the early childhood centers, and public schools, these places where children spend 40 to 50 hours a week, they have the most capacity to make a difference, a profound difference. This is where we can reconnect children with the natural world and create a future generation that values and preserves nature. And this is not a new idea. Traditionally, the first schools were in our homes or very local communities. Learning where we live and grow is part of the human experience. And as we learn, we are able to recognize that we are a member of a community. And with that understanding comes the rights and responsibilities of being a citizen of place. In her book, Bringing School to Life, Sarah Anderson explains that there is nothing more concrete, more real than the piece of earth and the communities where we live. Place both grounds us and connects us. Ideally, I think that the first places where our children learn can take the form of a safe nest where they can grow and explore. And as they fledge and spread their wings, and their boundaries of their community will expand. This belonging to place and connecting to place is part of an educational pedagogy that has become known as place-based education. So place-based education is quite simply just the process of using the local community and the environment as a starting point to teach concepts such as language arts, mathematics, social studies, science, and all the other subjects across curriculum, while emphasizing hands-on, real-world learning experiences. This concept is at the core of the work I do now with Grow Wise Learning. I work encouraging educators to adopt the practice of place-based education into their classrooms. David Sobel, an environmental educator and proponent of place-based education, explains further in the definition that the benefits of place-based education increase academic achievement, help students develop stronger ties to their community, enhance a student's appreciation for the natural world, and create heightened commitment to serving as active, contributing citizens. And this method of education has taken hold here in Michigan. It's part of the incredible efforts of the Great Lakes Stewardship Initiative. The Great Lakes Stewardship Initiative was launched in 2007 to develop knowledgeable and active stewards of the Great Lakes and their ecosystems through hands-on experiences that increase student achievement and help young Michigan residents become lifelong stewards of their environment. So they work through 9 regional hubs located in and around Michigan. Our local hub is called Groundswell, and it's housed in the Grand Valley State University College of Education. The Great Lakes Stewardship Initiative has produced some amazing publications, and the one I'm highlighting right now is about the benefits of place-based stewardship education. So beyond those items that David Sobel mentioned, their list includes improved critical thinking, enhanced workplace skills, such as leadership, persistence, taking responsibility and teamwork, social emotional development, but also, and this is probably my favorite, the awareness of career opportunities. What we're doing is introducing students to hands-on, real-world community members and showing them as mentors what they can be when they grow up. And this doesn't even mention the benefits to teachers, schools, and communities. So like I said, our local hub, Groundswell, has been doing incredible work to promote place-based education in West Michigan for years now. Most recently, they are conducting an exciting collaboration called the Grand Rapids Environmental Education Network, also known as GREEN. This cohort of amazing community partners has been working together to envision environmental education pathways for every student in GRPS and beyond. Green is being generously supported by the WMEAC Foundation, and this partnership is working to provide equitable and regular access to environmental education and nature-based learning for all students of the Grand Rapids Public Schools. Local community partners have teamed up to work to ensure that all young people are environmentally literate and connected to the natural world. And it has been my honor to work alongside these community partners. The Outdoor Discovery Center, the Blandford Nature Center, the Kent County Department of Public Works and Recycling, the John Ball Zoo, the Grand Rapids Public Museum, Grand Rapids Public Schools, Groundswell, and the Grand Valley State University College of Education, the Grand Valley Metro Council Lower Grand River Organization of Watersheds, affectionately known as ELGRO, our community's children, the Grand Rapids Parks and Recreation Department, and the West Michigan Environmental Action Council. I think I got everyone. It's quite an amazing list of community partners. And this is so important because community partners are key components to the efforts of place-based education, working to connect classrooms to local opportunities for stewardship and civic engagement. This cohort that has been assembled, I think, is doing dynamic and incredible work. So if we know this works, and so much work is being done right now to support it, why isn't it happening more? What are the challenges that prevent teachers from taking students outside? And what barriers are preventing educators from using their schoolyards as tools in education? So these were actually the guiding questions for my master's project in 2019. So it is a topic that I've thought an awful lot about. And curiously, what we know is part of what prevents teachers from using place as the foundation of student education is the very scaffolding that has been put there to assure that students receive a quality education. What I mean by that is the mandated reform of No Child Left Behind, the rollout of the Common Core curriculum, and the most recent iteration of the science requirements in the form of the Next Generation Science Standards have all but removed the concept of locality from public schools. This move to align standards across the country has resulted in the introduction of a generic placeless curriculum. While reforms such as this are incredibly well-meaning in their intent, they have removed all the context of local connection from the classrooms in the process of ensuring that each child receives a consistent education. While it is certainly relevant in promoting a vision of alignment and equal education for all, this has unintentionally resulted in this placeless education. And if their education is not connecting students to the places where they live and learn, they will have no interest in becoming stewards of those places. For this reason, there is a need for lessons to meet required curriculum connections more than ever. And the question I'm most often asked by educators is, how do we begin this process of connecting our classrooms and our students to the places where we live and learn? So in an effort to address that challenge, I developed a guidebook for implementation as the product of my master's project. This guidebook the emphasis is on elementary school because that is my specialty, but it has been designed as a scaffold of 7 core concepts that I've identified that can be used to align learning with place. These concepts can also obviously be used in middle and high school, but the guidebook emphasizes elementary. So today we're going to discuss 4 of the core concepts: sense of place, phonology, map making, and water fluency. The guidebook recognizes that our schools, as the first connection to place in education, aims to encourage educators to engage in the very local environment that is their schoolyard. Don't get me wrong, I am a firm believer that field trips in school are fabulous, but I also want students to think, I don't want them to think that nature connection is only available when you take a bus ride and travel to it. It is through those inquiry-led investigations and stewardship in their own schoolyards that we will grow the scholars that will become stewards of the places where they live and learn. So sense of place is the first core concept. And I think it's the true connector of the human experience. That yearning for a sense of place and its pursuit have long been romanticized and philosophized in literature throughout human history. For instance, in Walden, Thoreau went to live as one with the land and learn what it had to teach. We also see this relationship develop in a Sand County Almanac with descriptions of the seasons shifting around Aldo Leopold as he sought refuge in solitude. His writings conjure in each of us a longing to find a place, know it well, protect it, preserve it, and call it home. And this concept of place is innate in all animals. But what is unique for the human experience is that the places where we live and learn, play and grow become a central dimension to our human experience. The author Rebecca Solnit describes this bond as the sixth sense, a sense of place, an internal compass and map made by memory and spatial perception together. The development of this sense of place is part of our formative growth in childhood, and if acknowledged in education, it can maintain a presence throughout the span of a lifetime. So another key component that exists in early childhood, and if you're lucky, you can maintain it throughout your entire lifetime, is your sense of wonder. The environmentalist Rachel Carson says, the world viewed through the eyes of a child is from a perspective that is fresh, new, and full of wonder. The role of wonder needs to be encouraged in all realms of education, with opportunities allowing for the cultivation of wonder. First, in the safe confines of the schoolyard, educators can develop a student's skills of critical thinking and caregiving that will lend themselves to a realistic stewardship of place and connection to the local environment. And it was Socrates who said that wisdom begins in wonder. I believe we can grow wise learning if we pay attention to the natural world. And one of the truest ways to learn is by simply paying attention in every season. And in Michigan, we have the most wonderful representation of all 4 seasons unfolding around us. I know some may consider our winter too long, but that only deepens our connection to the emerging spring, right? So this practice of watching the seasons change and documenting it is called phenology. And though once foundational in the education, the study of nature or nature study itself has disappeared, much like the lost words. Phenology is the science of recording natural, regularly occurring events. It is the second core concept, and it can be used as a tool along with nature study to deepen the connection to place in education. I believe that by inviting the practice of phenology back into our classrooms, by learning to observe the natural world through the practice of keeping a regular nature journal, we can encourage students of all ages to develop relationships with place in every season. So when we learn to look at our landscape for cues, things like the arrival of spring begin to be signified by so much more than the date on a calendar. And one of the truest examples of this is the arrival of the red-winged blackbird. I love that my bird clock is going to sing right at this moment. Not a red-winged blackbird, but what we love about the red-winged blackbird is that distinctive trill that lets us know, heralds that spring is here. So a tool that I like to share with teachers is the National Phenology Network. And by using schoolyards as these laboratories of place, as part of citizen science projects or through work with local community partners, this kind of real-time data collection makes young students contributing members of the larger scientific community. So one of the things I want to share with you today, this is something called a personal phenology page. And it's just a simple worksheet that I've created to share with teachers. And I use it to encourage teachers to practice phonology with their students. This was inspired by a workshop led by Claire Walker Leslie, and I used some of her techniques and it made this is a very simple worksheet. But if this practice interests you, I have included a link to the personal phonology page, and it's in the anchor document, and also information about these incredible books. So first, make sure when you start that you add the date and time, and then I like to add the high and low temperatures. You can add the sunrise and sunset time, and so therefore you can get the length of day. And this also helps students begin to see patterns that are occurring near the solstice and the equinox. So I like to do, this was a program I did with the Rockford Early Childhood Center, and I like to encourage 3 views. So one is looking up close, and you can use like a hand lens or a loop. The next one is looking at something that you see at eye level, and then document something larger, and then capture, the last one is capture the view of the horizon. Claire Walker Leslie always, says that it's important to capture that view of the horizon to get the big picture. I also meant to mention that I add a circle at the top so you can add the moon phase as well. She reminds us that this is not fine art, and it's not meant to be fine art unless you want it to be fine art, of course. But what you're doing is creating a document or a memory that is connecting you to that time and that place. For our family, this paying attention happens by jotting down our observations in a notebook that we keep by the door. Eventually, through the years, we began to see patterns. For example, we noticed that it was not long after the dark-eyed juncos arrived in the fall that we would see the first snow. And it was the poet Mary Oliver who encourages us to pay attention, be astonished, and tell about it. I heard in an interview, I've heard her explain this concept further by saying that attention without feeling is only a report. You also need empathy. Reporting is a field guide, and they're great, they're helpful, but there's more. So by observing and paying attention, we are forming that relationship with place. And so, we've created a connection with this pattern, and we know that not long after that dark-eyed junco appears, that one of those wondrous signs of season shifting, that first snow, is about to occur. She says, attention is the beginning of devotion. And by honoring and perpetuating that sense of place in education is how the child will grow into an adult that stewards the places that hold meaning for them. So another thing I want to talk to you about is map making. It's the third core concept. And one of the reasons I find that it's important to talk about in elementary school is because here is when we find ourselves teaching children about the depths of the universe before we taught them about the wonders of their own backyard. In elementary education, we dive into global studies before, teaching them about the incredible resources that their watershed holds. This challenge has been called the outside in method. And what happens when we're teaching like this is we're sending a hidden message that important things are far away and disconnected from children, and nearby things, the local community and the environment, are unimportant and negligible. What I encourage is the gradual expanding of the boundaries as children grow at a pace that is both accessible and meaningful, beginning with the classroom, the schoolyard, the neighborhood, and then their watershed. And this way they're learning from the inside out. So, which brings me to water fluency. Water is the perfect topic that lends itself to a hands-on learning across the curriculum and every grade level. Because why? Because water is everywhere and everywhere is local. It provides an authentic understanding of the relevance of water in our lives and our world. Water access is a topic that can be used to introduce concepts of social justice and civic engagement. And so when you learn from the inside out like this, you strengthen your bond with place. And so here you see my boys in our local waterway, Rum Creek, which flows to the Rogue River, which flows to the Grand River, which leads to the most amazing natural resources, one of them on the globe. It's in our own backyard, and it's a sweetwater lake called Michigan. So I really encourage you, if you don't already know your watershed, take some time and check out the Lower Grand River Organization of Watershed. They have a Find My Watershed tool. So this leads me to another barrier preventing educators from using their schoolyards: the lack of an outdoor classroom. So this challenge represents itself in two ways. One is the very real truth that teachers that are in training are not being taught how to take students outdoors as part of pre-service teacher training. So, and unless they have a deep love or an existing personal narrative that calls them to do so, very few seek it out on their own. As part of the Green Initiative, we've developed a webinar series to connect teachers in a green cohort of monthly professional development sessions to initiate this concept. But the other is the fact that a physical space to take classes outdoors may not exist in some schoolyards. Some have incredible spaces, like I love this space at East Leonard Elementary, under the shade of a maple. Kids can watch their fellow students do presentations or performances, but not every schoolyard has an opportunity like that. So working alongside Kristen Trevelyan, the sustainability coordinator at the time, we imagined what would it look like if we could inventory every schoolyard in the district and determine if this lack of an outdoor classroom is a real or a perceived challenge. So the schoolyard features inventory was born. It was designed to review every schoolyard in the district in a purposeful and uniform manner, with the intent of looking at the existing features that provide opportunities for outdoor lessons and environmental education. So this summer, I'd hoped to do this with teachers and students, but because of the pandemic, I examined all 43 of the GRPS campuses in an effort to see what opportunities for green teaching our schoolyards held. And I just wanted to note, especially to this group, that while I did this, I couldn't help but think of Doug Tallamy's homegrown national park movement. I imagined just the capacity of acreage that our school districts steward. And what if that is the next layer that we can add to creating benefits, the benefits of stewarding space for wildlife? So I looked at the green schoolyard, green building, and green teaching components. And what I want to talk with you about today, I call the green teaching components. I looked to see, is there a garden available for teaching? Is there access to water? And is there space available to gather a class for an outdoor lesson? So in a room full of gardeners, you can only imagine the potential that I found. And I also want to mention that I believe it is key to teach children where their food comes from. But we know that as far as edible gardening happens in Michigan, the growing season in Michigan takes place outside of the calendar school year. So while this can become an awesome opportunity to utilize schoolyards for community gardening or summer programs, they're not ideal for supporting required curriculum. Now, that said, I looked for opportunities for no-mow areas. And what I mean by that are areas that the district can save resources like man hours and expensive fuel, and not mow areas and allow them to become native gardens. When I did this, so for the purpose of the inventory, I selected two specific kinds of gardens that these spaces could become. And I chose them because of their ability to connect classrooms to existing citizen science platforms and make use of existing curriculum that has been developed for teachers. So I rated the schoolyards on a scale of 1 to 5 with their potential to host a monarch way station. And if you're not familiar with citizen science, I added some information in the anchor document and also some deeper dive into the monarch way station information and requirements. But what was so cool is to see that in the schoolyards, some of our schoolyards are doing this intentionally and some of them are doing them accidentally, but we are raising monarchs in Grand Rapids, and there's so much potential for these schoolyards to become registered and be monarch way stations and be tracked with citizen science. So I also rated schoolyards on their potential to host wildlife habitat gardens. The National Wildlife Federation Schoolyard Habitat Gardens program has been going on since 1996, and they work to create, when you work with them, you're working to create schoolyard habitats. There are currently over 5,000 schools and counting that have been certified through this program. And in fact, some of the schools that I walked they're certified, and there is so much potential in our schoolyards to host food, water, shelter, and places for animals to raise their young on our school properties. So then another key component was looking for the connection between schoolyards and their local parks. So perhaps there's not space in a schoolyard for a variety of species to be studied, but there may be some within a park that is within walking distance. And so I'm old school, and I took out a paper map and I actually drew a circle around all of our schools. And I did this for two reasons. I wanted to see how far a 10-minute walk was. So each circle represents a 10-minute walk. And if within that circle, there was a local park. So there is incredible work being done in GR to ensure equitable access to green space. And our mayor, Rosalind Bliss, is working to ensure that everyone in the city has safe, easy access to a quality park within a 10-minute walk of home. And this effort has prioritized the historically underserved areas of Grand Rapids. What I love is I think it begins to show you how closely connected some of our schools are to each other. And I started to look at them sort of as like stewardship corridors throughout the district. Some of our schools are actually recognized as park schools because they were designed, the campuses were designed to serve as green space for their surrounding community. And then 19 of our GRPS schoolyards, which is 44%, have a local park within a walkable range. At the same time, another important component of this inventory in an urban district especially was to look at the work being done by Friends of Grand Rapids Parks and the Grand Rapids City of Parks and Recreation Department. In an effort to increase the tree canopy, trees have been planted in our schoolyards throughout the district. And these tree maps can become tools to help teachers connect their lessons to the species that are available to study. And really, I loved in some of the schoolyards, the contrast between these incredible mature trees that can shelter an outdoor classroom in contrast to the new trees that these kids can measure as they grow. While I was there, I also looked for opportunities to observe invasive species that may be present on a campus to look at potential stewardship projects. Okay, so we also looked at drains on site and all of the access to water in a building. So this is something I called a component of watershed education. And so I again looked at each schoolyard for the capacity to host watershed education. And using the information from the ELGRO website, we created maps of their schoolyard that note, and then we put where the drains are on site. And that way, students can observe and start to remediate non-point source pollution directly on their campus. And then also in an effort to encourage garden creation projects, all the water spigots around the school buildings were noted, looking for access and the ability to maintain gardens, looking for drains that need attention, looking for spigots that are perhaps broken and need to be repaired. So this was a really cool sort of next step to look at the capacity for our schoolyards to host some environmental education. And then finally, that outdoor classroom. So looking at all of the schoolyards and determining, what does an outdoor classroom look like? What do we need to establish an outdoor classroom, and where could we locate an outdoor classroom in the schoolyard? Because remember, our teacher said the largest barrier preventing them from taking students outdoors was this lack of an outdoor classroom. Now here we see an incredible outdoor classroom. This is the Brookside Elementary Pavilion, and it was recently remodeled to serve as this beautiful outdoor classroom. The really exciting thing here in this city is that we're working with an incredible initiative, creating nature playgrounds and outdoor classrooms in local schoolyards. The Cities Connecting Children to Nature initiative supports cities as they work to change and improve citywide systems so that all children have opportunities to play, learn, and grow with nature in their daily lives. What this means in GRPS is that recently Brookside Elementary, Burton Elementary and Middle School, and Kenosha have undergone renovations with these improvements. One of the grant outcomes was actually to increase the number of classroom lessons taking place outdoors. These outdoor classrooms were developed as part of the plan, and they're incredible. I got to help with some of what we called the schoolyard activations, and I love the one called the Nest, Burton Elementary and Middle School. They call it the Nest, and it overlooks Plaster Creek Park. And you know, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, especially with this group, that it's incredible to recognize that these schools, Brookside, Burton, and Kenosha, are connected by the urban waterway Plaster Creek. This is a very unique situation where schools border the same creek and they have the opportunity to learn. I mean, talk about the potential to understand the concept of upstream and downstream, and they can collect data and share it and work with, you know, our beloved Plaster Creek Stewards is of course the ideal community partner to aid in this effort. And I also want to mention that in situations like this, neighbors can serve as community partners. And so we know Allison and Jason Googans, who are neighbors of Kenosha Park, and they have done so much work through the years to establish this prairie creation on campus that is absolutely beautiful, and also work to help connect teachers with the spring ephemerals that are blooming right there in Kenosha Park. So my hope is that this is just the first of many nature playgrounds and outdoor classroom improvements to be seen throughout the city, and perhaps an inspiration for you to find a schoolyard to help become a community partner with. And I just wanted to briefly look at, like, what did different outdoor classrooms look like? For some of them, it's simply space under the shade of a tree. Some have wonderful grassy courtyards. And then these incredible circles of stumps, from stumps that have been donated or that have been made from trees that have been cut down on site. Now, I just want to reiterate again why it's so important to teach local over global concepts in place-based education. The topic of the environment has evolved to conjure concepts of global crisis in this current generation of students. Topics like climate change, plastic pollution of the oceans, these are among, like, these large scale tragedies that our youth are acutely aware of. These things can feel like they're both so far away from home and so large in their extent that they may seem insurmountable in terms of problems that can be solved or even related to. And burdening our students with the weight of the Earth's problems at an early age may actually turn them away from the outdoors altogether. So thinking back to that inside out approach, instead of allowing students to become overwhelmed with something like the global freshwater crisis, we can instead teach them how to steward their local waterways close to home. So this is why I started each schoolyard map with a satellite image from the Adopt a Drain feature of the ELGRO website. And teachers can actually find a drain on their campus and adopt one to care for. And so you can too, which if you haven't, I would definitely encourage you to check out their website and do. Because when we don't offer students opportunities to make positive, impactful connections to stewardship on an accessible scale, we run the risk of them experiencing something that has become known as ecophobia, a fear of ecological problems in the natural world, fear of oil spills, rainforest destruction, whale hunting. For some, it takes the form of fear of simply being outdoors. In his book, Beyond Ecophobia, David Sobel explains that we can cure the malaise of ecophobia with ecophilia, supporting a children's biological tendency to bond with the natural world. And if we prematurely ask children to deal with problems beyond their understanding and control, I think we cut them off from the possible source of their own strength. So again, talking about how to work from inside out. This is how we grow our community at a pace that is acceptable to their learning. In early elementary, their community is their classroom. As they grow, they expand those borders to include their school, and then their schoolyard, their neighborhood, and their watershed. And as the boundaries of their community grow, so does their capacity to affect change at a local level. This is how we are growing the change makers of the next generation, by empowering students to solve real world problems in their daily lives. David Sobel says the new idea here is we're not preparing students for tomorrow, we're preparing them to solve the problems of today. So their capacity to make that change on a tangible level empowers them to continue to grow and become active citizens of their community. And this stewardship and civic engagement leads me to the part of place-based education that I love the most, and I think it's probably the most important part of it. The ability to connect to local learning, to that direct action and stewardship aligned with the efforts of community partners, creates meaningful opportunities for children of all ages. So today I want to show you how those classroom observations can be turned, those phenology observations can be turned into a successful stewardship project. Students at Orchard View Elementary, under the direction of their teacher, the incredible Dr. Ann Keller, noticed bats and began to learn about them. Their research led them to the fact that bats in Michigan are in fact suffering from a disease called white nose syndrome. And they wanted to help bats. So they learned about the habitat requirements of bats, and then they designed, planted, and maintained a bat garden that will help attract insects to sustain the local bat population. River City Wild Ones was a community partner of this project, and I'm grateful for the education efforts that Wild Ones recognizes through projects like this, knowing that they are key to our mission of establishing native plant communities. And our very own Rebecca Marquardt does incredible work with Groundswell, supporting the design and installation of native perennial gardens in schools all over West Michigan. And so I want you to think back to one of those benefits of learning about learning through place-based education. It's learning about those career opportunities that this exposes children to. And so I imagine the children growing up working with Rebecca and recognizing that they can design gardens when they grow up one day. This connection of environmental stewardship and education is one of the main reasons that place-based education works so well. This resource is one, again, I said it earlier, but it's the one I always recommend. And I just want to make sure if you're curious about this, that you know to check out this Bringing School to Life by Sarah Anderson. Place-based education aims to connect students to learning that occurs outside of the four traditional walls of the classroom, while simultaneously placing value on raising students that are both active and contributing citizens, learning from the natural and human-made aspects of their community. So this book is full of road-tested examples, and it is this connection to community that is the real heart of place-based education. And teachers that succeed in doing it well are what I call keystone teachers. So in architecture, the keystone refers to the wedge-shaped stone at the apex of an arch. In construction, this is the final piece added to the arch, and yet it is the last element, and it actually ensures the strength of the entire structure. So the relevance of this stone is precisely why in the 1960s, ecologist Robert Payne coined the term keystone species to refer to the single most significant species within a community. Research shows leading environmentalists exclaim that their concern for the environment as an adult was encouraged as the product of repeated childhood experiences in nature, often in the presence of a role model. So here is the classroom of a keystone teacher. This is Michelle Holliday at GRPS Montessori. And teachers that are drawn to this type of teaching do so because they have similar memories, and it has become part of their personal narrative, which is why they are confident taking students outdoors. And they are in turn that crucial link in the chain, passing the torch of stewardship to the next generation. And we're teaching students so much more than the required curriculum with place-based education. We're building a web of community that includes children as acting members from an early age. We know that if children are allowed to learn how to care about a place and to care for it, they're more likely to consider living there and help solve its problems. A pride of place will also give them necessary skills to live well in any community. Place-based learning, wherever that place is, teaches a sense of community and gives students a model for living well anywhere. If teachers can provide students with meaningful and personal experiences, they can shape a generation that both loves the environment and has the confidence and know-how to save it. So if today's children are not creating similar memories through these palpable interactions with place, we're losing the opportunity to encourage the future stewards of our land. And in turn, the future scientists and creators that can perhaps help resolve our global environmental challenges. And kids do this naturally, if only we let them. Richard Louv says that passion is lifted from the earth itself by the muddy hands of the young. It travels along grass-stained sleeves to the heart. If we are going to save environmentalism and the environment, we must also save an endangered indicator species, the child in nature. Now, again, I'm speaking to a room full of gardeners, and you know how to garden for wildlife. This is not a new idea. So we need to focus on the 4 elements of habitat and think about how we can invite neighbors of all kinds into our yard. And what I want you to think about is not just in a schoolyard, but in your yard. How can you cultivate a kid-friendly habitat? So food, I mean, that's obviously the first one, but food, planting vegetables with children and encourage them to learn where their food comes from is one of the first sort of gateway connectors to getting kids outdoors. And I promise you that if a child plants a pea, they are much more likely to eat it. And another fun thing is you can learn to forage seasonally and responsibly with them. As far as water, what I say is weather is water, water is weather. So spend time outside no matter the weather. It's important that we show children and model our behavior that it's wonderful to be outside no matter the weather. Build shelters together, have a quiet spot to observe nature, camp out in the yard, begin a phenology journal, tune into the cycles of the moon. This generation needs to develop the personal narrative that will encourage them to pass the torch of stewardship. And I know as gardeners that you can help them do that. If we want children to flourish, to become truly empowered, let us allow them to love the earth before we ask them to save it. And so in the words of Mary Oliver in her book, Upstream, she says, teach the children. We don't matter so much, but the children do. Show them the daisies and the pale hepatica. Teach them the taste of sassafras and wintergreen, the lives of the blue sailors, mallow, sunbursts, the moccasin flowers, and the frisky ones, inkberry, lamb's quarters, blueberries, and the aromatic ones, rosemary, oregano. Give them peppermint to put in their pockets as they go to school. Give them the fields and the woods and the possibility of the world salvaged from the Lord's prophet. Stand them in the stream. Head them upstream. Rejoice as they learn to love this green space they live in, its sticks and leaves, and then the silent, beautiful blossoms. Attention is the beginning of devotion. And just quickly, if you don't know where to start, a favorite activity I tell teachers is take a favorite book and pair it with a natural experience and follow it up with a field guide. So this example is a great book by Kate Messner. She has a wonderful series, but this is Over and Under the Snow, and then go outside and look for tracks, because in winter, the tracks tell stories of the wonderful adventures that our animals have been all around us participating in. Because if a child is to keep alive his inborn sense of wonder, he needs the companionship of at least one adult who can share it, rediscovering with him the joy, the mystery, and the excitement of the world we live in. So you are that person, and together we can teach the next generation how to grow wise learning from this incredible earth that we share. I thank you for going on this adventure with me tonight. And I know we covered a lot of ground, and I especially thank you for Zooming and talking about nature when I know we'd probably all rather be outdoors. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
Yay, Sally. That was sensational. Thank you. Thank you so much for such an excellent presentation, my dear. That was such a joy. We do have some questions for you. And the first one is from Amy Heilman. She asks, do you find that many teachers are interested in learning more about outdoor classrooms? I hope so. If not, why do you think that is? Why they might not be interested in learning about outdoor classrooms?
Yeah, you know, my experience has been not so much that it's not that they're not interested. Our teachers, especially this year, I mean, have been through so much, and there are so many other burdens with time constraints in their daily schedules, the required curriculum, obviously testing, all of those necessary things. And one of the most important things is finding if they have support from administration, because there are so, like, a school day is like the busiest office building you've ever been in. And to orchestrate and manage that all very well, sometimes it can be hard if you're not comfortable figuring out how to take kids outside and, you know, asking them to get muddy as part of their school day, when that can become a challenge. There are great schools in our community doing work to do this, and there are also great teachers who are determined to see it, you know, happen. So don't lose heart. I have faith.
That's great. Amy has another question, but first I want to pose to you this question that Annie Friday shared. She said, as a community member, how can I support teachers in local schools to get outside or connect to nature, specifically GRPS, money or other resources?
So one of the things that I noticed on all the schoolyards is that there are gardens that have been left from previous residents, maybe teachers or parents that have had this kind of interest in the past. And what I observe is that those gardens, if they don't have someone there planning to tend it or thoughtfully tend it after that person has gone away, can become disheveled or overgrown. And what happens then is schools begin to feel like they're messy and they're a problem. And so I think one of the best things you could do is adopt your community school and connect with the administrators and get to know how they would feel about you helping tend their garden and caring for it. And especially skilled landscapers like Wild Ones who understand, you know, the difference between a weed and a native plant. Your knowledge is incredibly valuable, and our schoolyards could benefit from it. I hope that helped, Annie.
Another question that Amy had was, what's been your biggest frustration in your research and what has been your greatest joy?
Wow, Amy, thanks for that thoughtful question. My greatest joy is just working with the kids and the teachers and getting to get them outside. My frustration, I don't know, I'm gonna have to think on that and get back to you. I think it is sort of just, I see the potential for this. I see how much could be done, and it's hard, like I said, because there are so many other important initiatives and different things going on. I don't think this is the only way, but I think it is one way that could definitely benefit and reconnect our children to nature, and I would love to see it more utilized.
And part of that question too, she asks, what would help the Grand Rapids and West Michigan schools move further ahead in this direction of environmental education?
Amy, you're just going for it tonight. I love it. No, the things like the Green Initiative, the Green Network, these are big steps happening to address those core issues of making sure that we're connecting curriculum, because we have to make sure that we're tying into that required content, but at the same time offering opportunities like this for our students. So that, and then, you know, grant funding for gardens and the ability to maintain them, I would say are some of the big things.
And Sally, we have so many nice comments here. I just want to
Oh.
share with you. Well, first about the phenology. I think it's Marty. My chat is kind of abbreviated, so I can't see the person who said it. But somebody mentions the Aldo Leopold Foundation phenology calendar. Another person mentioned the phenology calendar from Missouri Department of Conservation. That is really wonderful. But really, we have these wonderful comments, Sally. I just want to share with you some of them because they're so nice. Amy said, your passion and knowledge is so impressive. West Michigan is lucky to have you. Your research is so fascinating. You've spent a tremendous amount of time putting it together. Thank you so much, says Ruth. Mindy Miner, we are so lucky to have Sally advocating for the education of the natural world for our children. Thank you for an excellent presentation. And Dave Munn says, thank you so very much. This is interesting. Really, we've got wonderful praises for you, Sally. Mandy Morgan, that presentation was so interesting. I'm going to apply that to raising my kids. And Marty MacArthur says, thank you very much for a lovely and important reminder that children need to know and learn about nature all around them. This was really fantastic. And thank you for your time, Sally. Oops, I think I might have one more question. I'm so sorry. Mindy asks, who hires your services, Sally? A school, a teacher? How do you fund your services? This is a great question for you.
Very good question. As a consultant, I'm an independent contractor, so you can reach out to me directly if you're interested in working with me. Right now, it has been my honor to work right now with the Grand Rapids Environmental Education Network. You know, one thing I should say is I started this work in Grand Rapids at the Blanford School and got to do my student teaching in that incredible program. So it really has come full circle that I'm getting to work with these kids at GRPS again. It's dear to my heart, and I'm thrilled to see teachers on a daily basis right now working to get students outside. Tomorrow, I'm going to Brookside, Annie Friday, and getting some kids outdoors. So it's happening.
Awesome. Well, I forgot to make this link, Sally. I'm just going to put it in the chat right now for Groundswell. The student-led stewardship that you shared, a video that they have. I know Groundswell has their presentations coming up. If you're interested, you can find out more from the Groundswell website that's been linked there. To learn more about some of the student projects and teacher projects of this year. And with that, I think we are come to a close. I just want to say once again, Sally, that was really remarkable. You just blew us away with all that you shared for us, and your resources that you shared in that anchor document are fantastic, including the document that you yourself put together. So thank you for doing all the work that you've done tonight. And we hope to see many of you at the farmers market on June 4th. That's from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. And again, June 11th will be the next farmers market. And then for our June program, we're talking about Go Beyond Beauty and talking about native plants. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.